If you're in the market for a new monitor, listen up because I have a new OLED in my clammy hands right now that's gonna blow your back, I mean mine. What is it? It's the KTC G27P6, which was sent to me by KTC for review, but you guys know me, the gloves are coming off regardless, and I'm going into full attack mode on this product to find any flaws, and to do so, first let's talk specs. So this is a 2560 by 1440 240Hz 27-inch 16:9 OLED panel with allegedly a response time of 0.03 milliseconds. It is FreeSync and G-Sync compatible, and yes, it does come with a stand that does everything you would expect it to do, so good there. And in terms of ports, pause the video if you want to know more, but it's as expected. And of course, it is also VESA mount compatible. But what could make this monitor really great, guys, is, well, sure, there's a ton of other monitors like it on the market using that same 240Hz OLED panel, but they're typically between, maybe at best $800 to upwards of $1,000. Well, get ready because this one typically goes for $700, but right now during the Black Friday deals that are going on, depending on whether or not you get that 10% coupon with an Amazon Prime membership, we're talking between roughly $515 to around $600 for this display. But is it actually good? Well, let's take a look. First, starting off with the color, and my first impressions are in SDR, it's good, of course, because it is an OLED display, but in HDR, like all the other OLED panels that I've tested, in my opinion, it can be a little bit lacking, and I think it's down to the white subpixel kind of washing colors out when it gets to those higher brightness levels. But in any case, what about the actual accuracy? And out of the box, it's actually not too bad, although I was able to substantially improve upon it. So if you are gonna at least try and use this for semi-professional work, I would certainly highly recommend you go ahead and check out my Patreon links in the description below so you can get access to the settings that I use as well as the ICC profile to substantially improve upon its calibration. But what about the HDR? And here, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot that I could do without messing up the SDR stuff, so I kind of left it as is, and as is not that great. It doesn't follow the EOTF curve how I'd like, and of course, the RGB balance is off as well. But moving on to color volume, and here in SDR, it is actually pretty good with DCI-P3 over 90%, but in HDR, again, like all the other OLED panels I've ever tested, I'm testing it as having unimpressive color volume once you get to those higher brightness levels. Again, my theory is probably due to the white subpixel until I hear otherwise. But moving on to brightness, and my first impressions here were actually it's pretty good and better than a lot of other OLED panels that I've seen in the past. So it is a far more usable monitor when it comes to your day-to-day usage, and you can see that in the 100% window where it does come in with a pretty impressive 222 nits. That's actually even better than the Asus PG27AQ DM, at least since the last time I measured that. So this could be the brightest full screen OLED monitor on the market, at least in the HDR cinema mode. But now moving on to the 10% window, and here once again, it's actually pretty impressive, coming in at 868 nits in that 10% window, which is just behind the Asus PG27AQ DM, which currently probably is overall the brightest OLED on the market. But what about in a game? And here, a little bit weird, it is falling behind that Asus monitor by quite a bit. Now, maybe other games will do better than Battlefield 1, but this is the result I got here, so your mileage may vary, and do keep in mind the overall scene brightness is probably going to be fairly similar between the majority of these monitors regardless. But now moving on to the minimum brightness and contrast, it's 0, which means it's infinite, and of course you get no blooming either, which means, yeah, with infinite contrast ratios and no weird issues, this could be actually a really good HDR monitor due to those factors. Now, in terms of latency, will this make a good competitive gaming monitor? And the answer is yes. Not only are you getting a high refresh rate at 240 Hz, but at just 26 milliseconds of measured latency, it is one of the faster monitors that I've ever measured. But now moving on to the UFO test, how does it look in motion? And because it's an OLED monitor and the response times are near instant, it looks absolutely incredible at that 240 Hz. You can see it's getting pretty close to the example there on the left, and it is significantly better than a mini LED 144 Hz monitor that I measured on the right as well, making this once again great for competitive gaming, as you'll be able to distinguish objects in motion far better than an LCD alternative. But in terms of text clarity, unfortunately guys, here, this is where WOLED definitely falls apart, as that extra white subpixel can cause some color fringing, but it's really going to depend on the content. So that will make it between that and the 1440p resolution probably not the best option out there when it comes to getting actual work done. Probably LCD plus 4K is going to be the clearest option you can get, especially if it has a glossy finish, which, speaking of finish, oh boy, yep, we got another matte finish here, guys. Unfortunately, honestly, this isn't KTC's fault, as they're getting it from LG, and I'm pretty sure everybody who buys from LG just gets the matte finish by default, but this does mean that as the scenes get brighter, you're going to see that definite oily effect. It's also going to lead to a grainier and muddier look overall, and it also leads to worse contrast perceivably in my experience, so it's a huge shame this is the case, and I would love to see a glossy version of this in the future. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and try and buff it out myself and measure how much better it really gets. So definitely get subscribed to see how those results turn out, as it massively improved the M32P10 when I did that one. But now let's go ahead and talk about viewing angles, and actually overall pretty good, although WOLED does still have some weird tinting problems. So if you look to the left and right of the display, it might look a little bit tinted differently depending on your position from the monitor, but the uniformity itself is actually pretty good overall. The brightness is within maybe 10 to 15 nits between the entire display, and of course, since it's OLED, there's no backlight bleed either. However, there are some issues when it comes to firmware with this display right now that I think, between these issues as well as WOLED kind of struggling in color volume and HDR, make it not necessarily the best HDR monitor on the market. However, I think that can kind of to an extent be said for a lot of WOLED panels. But the firmware issues I've found, guys, are there's two big ones. One is if the display goes to sleep, you actually have to press a button in the back right now to get it to turn back on. And then the other issue is, unfortunately, if you use the HDR cinema mode, which is the far better HDR mode as it's far brighter, it does not save your color temperatures at this time. So that does mean if you swap between SDR and HDR, which you will be doing, well, then you're going to have to go in and change the color temperature every time, as the default normal is just way too blue and just looks way off. Now, I have reported these to KTC, so hopefully there will be a firmware update in the near future, as they do seem to be pretty good at that on their previous monitors, but it is worth considering right now and taking into account when considering the overall value. But speaking of overall value, should you actually be buying this, or should you be running away screaming? Well, let's consider the facts. So is it a great HDR monitor? No, but it's not necessarily bad either. So maybe for your single player games, you'd want something that's like a 4K mini LED or Quantum OLED TV or something like that if you want the best of the best when it comes to HDR. However, as a competitive gaming monitor, guys, especially if you're mostly wanting to use it in SDR, I think this is probably one of the best options on the market today. It's a very strong value, as not only is it going to be one of the cleanest looking monitors in motion and have incredibly low input latency, but it's also significantly better value than anything else on the market today. So again, if you can get it for close to that $515 price point, if you can use those coupons, it is an absolute steal at this point, guys. I would definitely be picking one of these up. It is going to be one of the best value competitive gaming monitors on the market today, potentially the best, period. And honestly, again, $600 or below, I cannot recommend this enough, at least until we see some more competition from other brands. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.